Well, please join me in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth, its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together. Let us be silent for a moment as we reflect on our sorrows as well as celebrate our joys. For all the concerns and joys not spoken aloud today, may our spirit embrace you and our love fill your heart. So may be it. Let us sing together these words of comfort. With you, walking with you is our prayer. Very nice. As we prepare to take the offering this morning, let us embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we gather here each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. We also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. This month's recipient is Protect. Please read about them in your order of service and on the screen. To give online, go to prescottuu.org/giving. On the bottom hand side, click on Support Granite Peak to contribute. The link is also available in the chat. Please enjoy our offertory music, Afternoon at the Lake, composed by Mary Lou Prince. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through this offering. What is given in love is received in gratitude.
I was fortunate enough in 2018 to actually be at a training session in Los Angeles, sponsored by the Climate Reality Project. If you caught that inconvenient fact is inconvenient truth, and that film that sparked some significant changes by Al Gore back in the 2006, 2010 period. And so she actually introduced the entire session by reading reading that particular poem. She's such a young and powerful poet, such a national treasure. I love the use of the language. We saw that in the inauguration as well. But this particularly caught me for our message today. To keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for. And to me, that's really what it boils down to. We know in our hearts that the earth is worth fighting for, the beauty that we saw in the photos, the plants and creatures large and small, and of course, our fellow human beings. All that's clearly worth fighting for. The question for us today is, how do we keep rising up in the face of adversity, in the face of complacency, and perhaps even in the face of burnout? This morning, we're going to explore our own local climate change movement from that perspective. What is our wellspring for hope and action that girds us with the fortitude to keep rising up to advocate for tangible climate actions that will protect us all? Let's first briefly take a look at our local climate movement. The last 5+ years have been all about growing the movement through educational awareness. But candidly, the political climate was such that leadership in our community, frankly, wasn't listening. The Yavapai Climate Coalition that was formed in late 2016 presented a petition to the City Council in 2017 in April. Couldn't even get it on the agenda. Again, in the fall of 2019, we were rebuffed by city management because the feeling was, City Council, this is not on their agenda. So we simply couldn't move our local leadership to entertain a conversation on climate change, sadly. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. Not deterred, we, like many others, turned to a virtual educational format. We even held our first virtual Earth Week in 2020. But then, in the summer of 2021, local elections in Prescott proved to be an amazing transformational moment for our community and a number of community concerns, from growth and development to water resources to climate impacts. And when that election occurred, we were ready. Just 1 week prior to the elections on August 3rd, the coalition had kicked off its Protect campaign at the Prescott Public Library. Protect, now that's where I'm missing my t-shirt here. Protect, planning for the resiliency of our towns, the environment, climate, and tourism. Our goal, to secure support for the implementation of a climate risk assessment for our region in 2022, this year. We wanted assessments similar to that was performed for Sedona and the Verde Valley in 2020. We've been arguing that 1/2 of our county is having this conversation. Why not this side of Mignus Mountain? The assessment we're calling for will look at all those climate impacts that we're experiencing now. Long-term drought, hotter temperature, flooding events, and increased potential for wildfire impacts. A climate risk assessment will identify and accurately describe the vulnerable areas of those specific climate impacts and provide a base framework for moving on to tangible solutions that can be tailored to fit the needs, the values, and the priorities of our different communities in the Quad Cities region. The campaign has a specific measurable goal with a stated timeline and a series of actions, all part of a larger campaign strategy, not just a couple of one-off events every now and then. That series of actions includes not just events with speakers and films, but a petition drive, a postcard campaign, event tabling, a newsletter, a new Protect website, a Facebook and Instagram presence, letters to the editor, and interspersed a climate rally or two. Underlying all that was the message that we're all in this together. We're all vulnerable, some obviously more than others, to the climate impacts in our community. We didn't argue about the science of climate change, the facts. We highlighted the climate events that we're all experiencing around the planet, but also right here and now in the Quad Cities. We looked for, and this is important, we looked for common ground. Note I've been consistently saying climate impacts. The phrase climate change can sadly be divisive. and perhaps more so in rural areas like our Quad Cities region. So we've been focusing on language like climate impacts, and we've focused on achieving a very modest first step, but an important gateway step, the climate risk assessment. So speaking today on April 10th, the Protect campaign is indeed making progress. In January of this year, Prescott City Council specifically identified the Protect proposal for a climate risk assessment to be a priority for their 2022 council agenda. In February, they put that item on a study session to be held April 26th, right in the middle of Earth Week. It's just wonderful timing for us. And we're very hopeful, indeed optimistic, that this year we will in fact see the Quad Cities climate risk assessment approved and even completed. Now, more work is ahead of us, but it's a meaningful first step in the Quad Cities region. So this story represents an interesting case study because look at what we, you, I, and other supporters committed to care of the earth had to overcome these past several years and somehow keep rising up. As I was thinking of a title for this message, I was asking, what keeps us all engaged in the midst of this silence? What keeps us going? Where do we go for inspiration or courage to persist? Where do you and I go? What is our wellspring for hope and action? In fact, what is a wellspring? Trust me, I seriously do not use that word. I mean, really, who uses that word these days? But somehow, and I sometimes call these not coincidence, but God incidents, it just came to me while I was preparing for this message, because it's so descriptive. The definition is a source of continued supply. It obviously refers to springs and wells that have been and continue to be so vital for human settlement. A wellspring can evoke different meanings, anything that is bountiful source of something. But today we're going to talk about our spiritual wellspring. For I believe it's not the head, but the heart that moves us to act from a place of love and to persist and be resilient. In the UU wisdom tradition, it's the seventh principle: respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, that moves us to rise up and fight for the rights of nature and the rights of all peoples impacted by the devastating trends of climate change. Reverend Forrest Gilmore, a well-known UU minister, expounds on the seventh principle by writing, "Our seventh principle may be our Unitarian Universalist way of coming to fully embrace something greater than ourselves. The interdependent web expressed in the spirit of life, the ground of all being, the oneness of all existence, community forming power, the process of life, the creative force, even God, can help us develop that social understanding of ourselves that we in our culture so desperately need. It's a source of meaning to which we can educate and dedicate our lives." Those principles, excuse me, with all of my allergy medicine, I tend to dry out a little bit. These principles are called a living tradition. I'm particularly drawn to the UU expression and affirmation of what are characterized as the 6 sources to this tradition. Sources that, frankly, in the context of my message, can be seen as the UU wellspring. There are 6 of them, as I said. I'm not going to read all of them, but give you a flavor for what that wellspring, how it's defined, how it contributes to how we respond as a UU community. Number 1, the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, which moves us to a renewal of spirit. Another source is the words and deeds of prophetic people. We've even heard conversations about that from the pulpit before. Wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual journey in life. Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings. And the final 6th source spiritual teachings of earth-centered tradition, which celebrates the sacred circle of life and instructs us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. All global leaders and traditions have this underlying connection to the earth, with principle or obligations around stewardship and care for the earth. Pope Francis called it ecological spirituality. Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book, Love Letters from the Earth, writes from a Buddhist perspective that we often forget that the planet we are living on has given us all the elements that make up our bodies, the water in our flesh, our bones, and all the microscopic cells inside our bodies all come from the earth. And we are always carrying her with us. He goes on to say that we're a living, breathing manifestation of this beautiful and generous planet. Knowing this, we can begin to walk differently and to care for her differently. Thich Nhat Hanh refers in these same passages to a love relationship with the earth, where each of us must have if the earth is to survive and if we are to survive as a people. Listen to this brief video for some further interfaith perspectives. Yeah, I believe that that video really expresses beautifully the commonality, not the division, the commonality that different faith traditions have around stewardship and love of Mother Earth. Others find that the source of Wellspring being nature. The Reverend Doug Bland, who spoke here in February, wrote that people of many faith traditions affirm that they're most likely to experience the presence of the divine in nature. People attest to a sense of peace and unity in nature that we don't experience in our divided, polarized culture. And you can look at Goldwater Lake here, and I think that's part of the beauty that Leslie expressed at the outset, the love we have for this community because of the mountains and the forests and the lake, and that connection that we can make. Doug goes on to say, nature may prove to be our own common ground. We all need beauty, drinkable water, clean air, and nourishing food. Our Indigenous brothers and sisters, who we honored in our land acknowledgement this morning, likewise affirmed the sacredness and centrality of land and nature. Just yesterday, last night, when I was opening some email, a friend, Valerie Nuvasawe Tewa Hopi of the Tewa Corn Clan, in it, she shared this wisdom from her father in this email. All our songs, our prayers, our discussions that happen in ceremony support this notion of caring for Mother Earth, the air, the water, the plants, the animals, and all living things on Earth, so we can continue to be here. Our hiksa, breath of life, is replenished if we do these things. And I was so glad that I opened that email last night. It just spoke to me into this message. Chief Luther Standing Bear has written, the old Lakota was wise. He knew that man's heart was wise. He knew that man's heart away from nature becomes hard. He knew that lack of respect for growing living things soon leads to lack of respect for humans. And from Ohayesa of the Sioux Nation, the great mystery is everywhere. He is in the earth and the water, the heat and the cold, rocks and trees, suns and sky. He's also in us. There are wonders all about us and within, but if we are quiet and obedient to the voice of the Spirit, sometimes we may understand these mysteries. And lastly, a Hayden Oshone teaching. We are a part of everything that is beneath us, above us, and around us. Our past is our present is our future, and our future is 7 generations past and present. I think that kind of in a very beautiful language, somewhat embodies the Alabama song that we heard at the beginning, pass it down. In my own faith journey, I still remember the day that I approached my Methodist minister. I was seeking some guidance on where to spend my volunteer time. And I seemed to be at a marking point in my life. And his response was, listen to your heart, what it is that's breaking your heart. And that reminded me of something I had also read from Thich Nhat Hanh. He writes, what we most need to do is to hear within us the sound of the earth crying. I heard and felt those cries and that heartbreak. Within just a few weeks, I had actually joined Arizona Interfaith Power and Light, the organization that Doug Bland represents, an interfaith group devoted to mobilizing people of faith to care for our common home and work for climate justice. Thus, that was my wellspring, and I began and continued my own spiritual journey and activist journey, dedicating my life to climate justice. As we have seen through many different voices this morning, these wellsprings have many sources. Your own journeys, I know, contain stories of hope and inspiration that drive you to action and sustain you. And what's wonderful about the wellspring, yours and mine, is that it is indeed abundant. As Proverb 4 verse 23 says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it is the wellspring of life. It is with and through these many wellsprings that the Protect campaign and the local climate movement continues to grow. Yet, as noted earlier, the work is clearly not done. The months of April, this month, and May are critical. With funding from Seeds of Support, we'll be able to increase the exposure in the larger community, including our recent articles in the April issue of Five Fences magazine, accelerate our focus on our postcard campaign, and continue the services of our part-time campaign coordinator. I hope that today's message moves you to examine your own wellspring and discover the source of the hope and inspiration that will provide you that wellspring to action. And with us, rise up to protect and restore the earth, our common home. Thank you. Zoom, hello again. For those of you on Zoom, you can go to prescottearthday.org, and there's an Earth Week schedule in there as well. The Protect campaign and me personally, we're so grateful for Granite Peak UU support over the past several years. You have been a blessing to our own spiritual journey, but also a blessing to the local climate movement. We hold meetings here. Reverend Patty speaks from the pulpit. We declared a climate emergency. So you've been there all the way. I'm deeply, deeply thankful for that. You've been a part of the Interfaith Climate Action Team that we created. You're a part of the green team that Mary Steenhoek is resurrecting here. It's just so important to our work. The faith community, as we saw throughout the Interfaith video, but hopefully you glean from my message as well. That faith or spiritual tradition, whatever its source, really has made us more resilient. So when that transformational moment occurred on August 3rd, like I said, we were ready. So join with us at the many events. It's the largest event of Earth Week that we put on to date, to demonstrate to the community and to City Council leadership how deep and broad the community's commitment really is for climate action. That's one of the most supporting actions that you can take, just showing up. Some of you that perhaps were engaged with Save the Dells movement. I was, Leslie was, I know several of you out here in the audience were and on Zoom. That physical presence at rallies, at City Hall, that is so important. And you'll see there's several opportunities during the week. to not just show up to watch a film, which is important because we've got one here at Granite Peak UU. We have one at Granite Peak UU. We stress that. But to also be present to show your support to the broader community. And then I just encourage you to keep rising up for our planet Earth and make every day Earth Day.
Thank you, Patrick. With the extinguishing of our chalice, our worship time has ended and now our service begins. Everyone join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I now invite you to visit with friends and visitors here in person or on Zoom. Remember, Patrick's available to give you Earth Week flyers. We've got Barb and Suki to talk about the rummage sale here in the sanctuary. And I think that's excellent. And are there any visitors here for the first time today that would like to stand and say hi? All right. Yes. Oh, wonderful. Al and Peggy Myers from Michigan for Robert's book signing. Wonderful. Thanks. Nice to have you with us. And I know the couple over here, why don't you stand? They said this is their first in sanctuary church service they've been to since COVID, 2 years, right? Yeah, right. So I'm glad you're here today. So I now invite you to take a moment to greet your neighbors, especially those visiting for the first time, and have a wonderful week. Thank you.